Look at how information moves right now. A false narrative drops into the ecosystem and replicates almost instantly across thousands of nodes. Hours, sometimes days later, a professional fact-checker issues a correction. By the time that correction goes live, millions of users have already processed the deception as reality. The lie has an insurmountable head start. This creates a psychological barrier known as cognitive anchoring. The human brain heavily weights the very first piece of information it receives on a subject, establishing a baseline that is incredibly difficult to overwrite. Attempting to overwrite it can actually make things worse. When people read a retraction, the sheer repetition of the false claim often triggers the familiarity backfire effect. The correction fades from memory, but the core falsehood remains, now feeling even more familiar and true. Operating after the fact guarantees failure. You cannot systemically defend an information environment by chasing rumors that have already anchored themselves in the public consciousness. The focus is shifting toward preemptive defense. Researchers call this prebunking. It relies on psychological inoculation theory. Just like a medical vaccine, you expose an individual to a weakened, controlled dose of a threat to build their resistance before they encounter the live virus. Experiencing these manipulative tactics in a safe environment trains the brain to recognize the rhetorical structure. When the user later encounters weaponized propaganda in the wild, they naturally generate cognitive counterarguments to block it. To make this work at scale, we have to evolve our tools. We need to transition from simple psychological simulations to advanced logic-based architectures that use tiered progression loops and hybrid AI-human auditing. The first wave of gamified interventions, like Bad News and Harmony Square, proved that inoculation could be digitized. They relied heavily on transportation theory, wrapping the lesson in a role-playing narrative. As you can see here, players are forced to step into the shoes of a malicious actor, actively drafting and spreading provocative fakes. The system delivers its weakened dose by gamifying the depict taxonomy of manipulation techniques. The dashboard metrics reward the player with followers and credibility for successfully deploying tactics like emotional polarization and impersonation. Surviving the simulation requires you to master how manipulation works. The intended outcome is that understanding the playbook makes you immune to it. But when researchers applied signal detection theory to measure the actual cognitive discernment of players after the game, a serious side effect emerged. This chart illustrates a conservative response bias. Playing the role of a disinformation agent doesn't necessarily improve a user's ability to spot the absolute truth. Instead, their decision threshold shifts to the left. They become hyper-skeptical, rejecting both fake headlines and perfectly legitimate factual reports. A citizenry that automatically distrusts all institutional information, regardless of accuracy, is just as vulnerable as a citizenry that believes every lie. Training people strictly to identify manipulation techniques breeds a generalized paranoia. True resilience requires precise analytical discipline. This brings us to the next architectural generation, logic-based inoculation. Instead of focusing on surface-level emotional manipulation, these platforms target the structural fallacy. Systems like Cranky Uncle and Ubunk stop asking players to guess whether a headline is a binary true or false. They train users to deconstruct the underlying logic of the claim itself. The core gameplay revolves around locating specific rhetorical errors, like spotting a strawman argument, identifying a false choice, or highlighting a slothful induction. But even a perfect logic lesson has a shelf life. Signal detection studies show that media literacy skills typically vanish within weeks if the intervention is just a one-off event. To counter cognitive decay, modern systems integrate continuous progression loops. By issuing daily missions and awarding reputation points, they force the brain to turn slow, effortful analysis into a rapid, automated habit. This weight class model adapts combat sports. Beginners are restricted to low complexity tiers, dealing with unambiguous falsehoods to build baseline proficiency. Only at higher weight classes do users face complex, multi-layered cognitive threats, like parsing institutional conflicts of interest or identifying generative AI deepfakes. Defense against digital deception cannot be treated as a single workshop. It requires a sustained architecture that rewards persistent, escalating engagement. If you want to scale this kind of peer-to-peer cognitive training globally, you need automated officiating to arbitrate the sheer volume of logic duels. In physical sports, AI referees are highly effective. Computer vision models evaluate measurable spatial boundaries and objective physical contact. Language, however, is deeply ambiguous. Treating a large language model as an absolute arbiter of natural language claims introduces severe vulnerabilities. These systems suffer from verbosity bias. They frequently mistake dense jargon and complex sentence structures for actual intellectual rigor. They also exhibit authority bias, naturally favoring claims that use highly confident framing or align themselves with prestigious names, completely independent of factual accuracy. Then there is the threat of invisible prompt injections. An attacker can hide instructions, like white text on a white background, within a submitted document. A human user won't see it, but the AI's logic core processes it directly. These stealth commands easily bypass standard filters, forcing the AI to generate a biased, favorable verdict and corrupting the integrity of the entire platform. Language is too subjective and too easily exploited by bad actors for us to hand over the final verdict to a black box algorithm. The architectural solution is the pluralistic AI auditor. We restrict the AI to a processing role. It breaks down incoming claims into verifiable logic nodes and flags potential fallacies to speed up the review process. The final arbitration is handed over to decentralized human peer networks, who vote to validate the contextual accuracy and the true intent behind the claim. Integrating social mechanics, like allowing users to share their verified fight verdicts, creates a crucial feedback loop. It scales the intervention well beyond the individual player. Misinformation goes viral through emotional resonance and group identity, but cognitive resilience can travel across those exact same networks. Each shared verdict acts as an active node, distributing digital defense strategies directly to the user's social circle. Logic-based deconstruction, a tiered progression, and hybrid AI-human auditing. By engineering our digital immune systems around these three pillars, we stop being passive consumers waiting for a fact-checker to save us, and become active, disciplined operators of our own information environment.